I got out of the service in Oakland, California, and I got out there because I was kind of interested in settling down in San Francisco. Well, a few short days after I got to San Francisco and realized how expensive it was going to be, I decided I would take a trip across the country. Something I've never actually really had a chance to do unless I was driving from one place to another. I had basically no car at that time because I had just gotten out of the service and didn't really need a car when I was in the service. So, what I decided to do was just kind of hitchhike across the country. Um, Started off in San Francisco or Oakland, and went north. Went through Oregon, um, through Washington, and then I went into Canada for a short bit, came back out of Canada, and then swept across, I guess, Montana and all of the northern states from that point there. I hit Minnesota and Michigan, um, ended up on the East Coast for a while, kind of traveled all the way down the East Coast, um, down to Florida, and then kind of went all the way to the West. Went through Texas, realizing for the very first time that that's a really huge state. And it's like when you enter Texas, it's like you travel all the way across Texas and don't realize when this thing is ever going to end. Anyway, I ended up back in California, and so started working for a hotel for a while, and then I worked as their investigator, and then decided, that wasn't really my thing, and so ended up quitting and going back to school, which I thought was going to be kind of an interesting thing to do, to, revisit college for a second time. And so I went to San Francisco State University, and during one of the breaks at San Francisco State, I had the summer off, and so decided to pick up a part-time job just to make some money during the summer and then go back to school again. And so during this time, I worked for, I went through a temp agency and ended up working for Pacific Bell, which eventually gets pushed out as AT&T. But during the time when it was Pacific Bell, it was mostly on the West Coast kind of a thing. And I had one of those temporary jobs where a whole bunch of us sat in a room. There's like 30 of us, I think, 30 or 40 of us. And we would sit around this huge, big table, and we'd kind of wait for an assignment. And so while I was there, one of the things I noticed was it was kind of this round robin of picking on people at the table. And what usually happened was somebody who couldn't speak English very well, or basically just had nobody to defend him or her, would get attacked by probably about 5 or 6 of the people who were actually in there. I don't mean physical attacks, I mean verbal attacks. They look for any opening that they could come at you at, and then, just kind of tear you apart. Well, they went after me at one point, realized coming after me was not a good idea because I could rip them to shreds when it came to a verbal altercation. So they kind of left me alone, and then kind of looked for other people that they could go after. Well, one of the people they found was this young woman from Hong Kong named Sally. Sally wasn't her real name. She had an actual, Chinese name, but in order, I guess, to make things easier on her, she kind of, lived in San Francisco. She adopted the name Sally, and kind of went with that. Well, one of the days, they were kind of kind of moving around her like, hyenas or coyotes, and basically started attacking her, verbally. And she tried to defend herself, but her English was not very good. She had some English, but when you're being attacked like that by 3 or 4 people, sometimes 5 people, it's really, really hard to put up a good defense unless you have a really good master of the English language. So that was like the first day that they kind of went after her, but then they realized that this was an easy victim. So, like I said, we were here like every day, and it was like a 5 day a week assignment. So they would just keep attacking her each and every day. Well, about the third day, I was getting a little tired of this, and so I sat next to her. She didn't realize I was doing this. And they started attacking her again, and I interjected myself in between them and her, and basically I didn't really defend her, but I made it so their attack had to be about me and her. And quickly they realized this was not a good idea because, again, I'm a lot faster in communicating something, and especially when it comes to that kind of approach. Well, they immediately realized this was not a good idea anymore, so they kind of like moved off from her and went to find other victims. Well, that day on, Sally figured sitting next to me was probably a really good idea, so she was always sitting next to me. And so what happened is when we got assignments, because basically the whole project for this this unit at Pacific Bell was to move things from one side of the building to the other side of the building. And it was a huge building. And so I would, grab a whole bunch of files that they would tell me that needed to be moved, so I'd move them, and then just basically move them to the other side of the building and then refile them when I was over there. We didn't have any hand trucks or anything, so you basically had to do everything by hand. And it was a huge walk because, like I said, this building was humongous. So anyway, I was doing this for a couple of months, and so Sally was always like hanging out with me because she would find any assignment that was close to me, because those guys and girls would attack anybody, even if they weren't at the table. And they would look for victims throughout the day. It was really a bad environment, but it's what it was, and when you're dealing with that sort of thing, you kind of take it as it goes. So, like I said, she kind of stuck with me the entire time. So at one point, I was getting close to going back to school again, and so our supervisor, who was another one of our temps, I went to him and I said, "Hey dude, I'm about to leave here," and I started to realize Sally was really hanging on to me. So I told him I'm probably going to be leaving in 2 weeks, so this is like my 2-week notice. Please don't tell Sally, because I didn't want to create any specific problems. I should note, right before I took this job, I had broken up with my long-term girlfriend, and I really was not looking for another partner at this particular time. And so anyway, the last day came around, and I was, again, moving things from one side of the building to the other side of the building. So I was kind of like lying on my back, kind of like going through the files like this. And next thing I noticed, there were a pair of boots right in front of me, black boots. Sally wore black each and every day. And I immediately knew who it was. And she looked at me and she goes, "You are leaving." I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be leaving." And she goes, "Phone number." And I was like, "Phone number? Give me your phone number." And I was like, kind of at a loss for anything else to say. So I, being kind of weak at that moment, I gave her my phone number and thought, that's not going to be a problem because she's never going to call me. Sure enough, when I got home, almost by the moment that I got home, she called me. And so what ended up happening is we ended up dating for about 6 or 7 months. The thing I should point out about Sally is she was a very violent person. And I think she never really had any relationships with anybody else, romantic relationships. And so kind of saw everything as a hostile environment, because like those young people that attacked her at Pacific Bell, um, they just, I guess they kind of took advantage of her, and I think that's kind of what her whole life had, was this sort of thing happening to her all the time. So anyway, we had an interesting relationship. The only thing I didn't like about it is she used to pinch me in the arm really, really hard. I mean, like, I'm sure everybody's been pinched before, but I will guarantee you've never been pinched like this. And it was like severe pain every time she did it. And I don't know why she did it, but she might have thought it was some weird term of endearment, but it wasn't. It hurt like you wouldn't believe. She was also very violent around other people. And I should point out, and I may even use this as the thumbnail for this, but she looked identical to Michelle Yeoh. I mean, dead on, looked exactly like her, but a young version of her. And so, one day, we happened to be going to a movie. It's when things were still going fine. And I forget what the movie was playing, but in the theater, in one of the other theaters, in one of the other theaters within the complex, was playing the James Bond movie with Michelle Yeoh. And so I didn't think anything of it because we weren't going to see that movie. I don't honestly remember what we went to see. But anyway, so the ticket guy was like taking our tickets, took my ticket. He was about to grab her ticket and looked directly into her face and says, "Oh my God, you look just like the woman in the James Bond movie." Now, the other thing I should point out is Sally, for some reason, thought Michelle Yeoh was extremely ugly. And years later, I've kind of analyzed why I think this was. But I think it was because Sally considered herself ugly. She wasn't. She was very attractive. I mean, like I said, she looked identical to Michelle Yeoh, who is extremely attractive. But for some reason, she was convinced that she was not very attractive. And so whenever she saw a picture of Michelle Yeoh or saw a movie where Michelle Yeoh was in it, she would consider her ugly because they looked identical. So anyway, going back to our story of the ticket taker, when he said that, I immediately looked over at Sally, saw the anger like fuming through her face, and went, I'll go grab us some seats. And I went directly in there. And so 5-10 minutes later, because the movie hadn't started yet, she shows up, she's got popcorn with her, and she sits down. And I turned to her and I said, "He's still alive, right?" And she just kind of went, "Okay, we don't have to worry about the police coming, right?" I went, "Okay, I guess that's good." So anyway, that was Sally. Sally worked for a stuffed animal company, and it was very interesting because she would bring. I have a stuffed animal collection, which I will probably talk about a whole bunch of times on this channel, but she saw all of my stuffed animals, and after getting over the fact that a grown man had stuffed animals, it never seemed to, get past her that she worked at a stuffed animal company. But anyway, she started bringing me stuffed animals, like multiple times she came over. And I kept telling her, "You don't have to do that. It's, not necessary." And it was kind of interesting. I didn't really tell her the story of where most of the stuffed animals came from, but they came from women I knew in the past. So I never really bought a stuffed animal for myself. They just came from somebody else. So anyway, one day she's at work, and she calls me up, and at this time, I'm going through school. I'm back in school, but she calls me up and she says, do you want a stupid looking snake? And I was like, a what? And she's like, a stupid looking snake. And I was like, okay. I was like, I had no idea where to go with that. So anyway, when she came over to my house right after work and shoves this stupid looking snake into my face and goes, stupid looking snake. And to this day, and I'll probably show a picture of this. I don't know if this is going to be on my thumbnail as well, but if not, I'll have a picture like now. And you'll see exactly what I mean by what she meant by stupid looking snake. I named him Iggy because he seemed to look like an Iggy. But yeah, he looked like a really stupid looking snake. Anyway, after that 6 or 7 months, I was getting a little tired of her hurting me. I mean, it was like every day or so, she would do that huge pinch. She would also start hitting me in the arm like really, really hard. And I didn't know why. It was just kind of like one of those weird things that she kept doing over and over. I think she just had problems with people, and that's kind of how she dealt with it. And so during our last month together, I decided I had to break up with her. My friends were telling me, dude, you need to break up with her. And so I sat her down one day, one evening, and explained to her why we really shouldn't be together anymore. And right at that moment, she turned to me and acted like she couldn't speak English anymore and left. I went, okay, wondering if she got it or not. And then she was back the next day like nothing had happened. We went through that dance a couple of times. I knew she could understand what I was saying. And so I kept trying to tell her this over and over again until finally it kicked in and she realized that we weren't going to be together anymore. And then she called me up and said she had bought things for me during our time together, like it bought me a soda or something like that and brought it over, and said she was now sending me a bill for $300 because that's what it cost. Now keep in mind, it didn't cost anywhere near that. If she had an actual real total of what that was, it probably would have been about $4 or $5. And so she kept calling me up on the phone and yelling at me, telling me that I needed to pay this money back to her because it's the only way that I would, be okay in her eyes. And I was like, I really don't care. I'm just like, I'm not paying you $300 in order to break up with you. And so she called me and just harangued me constantly on the phone until I just wouldn't take any of her phone calls anymore. She showed up at my apartment a couple of times and I just wouldn't let her in. She made so much noise at one point, the police showed up. And then they knocked on the door and asked me what was going on. I explained it to them, and they said, thank you, do you want to let her in? I was like, no, I do not want to let her in. I don't want anything more to do with her. And so they didn't take her away. She left on her own, but that was the last time I saw her. And let's just say it was a very interesting breakup that I would not actually ever wish on anybody else. Thank you.